You're going to do what you're going to do, so.
How stressed will it make you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right, okay, you can hear me. And now are we live streaming?
Probably.
Okay, we are probably live streaming. That is good. It's what you want to hear. Cool. So thank you for coming along to EdinburghJS. Really great to see some old faces, new faces, and I hope you've enjoyed the beer and pizza. We've got a few talks tonight. I kind of wanted to create a night on the idea of sort of community intros. So like, who is it that works in Edinburgh? And what is it that they do? I think that's quite a valuable thing because you can get like technical content wherever you want online. But I think the people in the city here working are what makes our community the community. So I've got a few talks tonight, and I will also be doing one on a book that I read last week, which I thought was interesting. But before we get into that, Pete is going to talk to you about why you don't need a CS degree.
Cool.
Thank you, Pete.
Awesome. Firstly, can I just get a show of hands? Who is like a self-taught developer? Okay, there's like 3, 4 of you. Who's been to boot camp? It's like 4 or 5. No guesses for which boot camp, I guess. And does anyone have a CS degree here? Ooh, okay. Apologies in advance. Cool. So basically, for the last 3 years, I've been running a website called No CS Degree, where I basically share stories of people that have broken into tech when they've been self-taught or gone to coding bootcamp. I've interviewed over 150 developers to date, and people come from all kinds of backgrounds, from being a waitress to being a sawmill worker to cleaning toilets, to any profession you can imagine, and they've gotten into tech without the standard like 4-year computer science degree. So basically, a few years ago, I was learning to code, and I kind of needed some inspiration because I had a politics and Spanish degree, and that wasn't a whole lot of use in the job market. But I didn't know any developers I could really talk to about coding, and I needed to get way into the tech profession. So basically, I was a member of a few communities online, and I just started to ask questions about people's backgrounds, basically. So I spoke to this guy, Richard, and I asked him about his coding career. And Richard replied that he was making like $10,000 to $15,000 a month. He was like 21 at the time. He'd left school at 16. He'd like basically just taught himself to code. And when he got that contract, he like had a freelancer rate. And he found out that the company he was pitching for was a bank, which had lots of money. So he just doubled his rate, and they said yes. So that's a good lesson maybe for any freelancers here. Harry Dry created a dating website for Kanye West fans, which went viral. And he got like a lot of attention. And he just learned JavaScript on YouTube from a programmer called Westboss. And you can see the very basic website on the next slide. Taylor Swift fans are banned from the website, controversially. And yeah, Harry got a job just from making this like really basic website. And he did like, I think, marketing at university. And last but not least, Peter Levels has made a great career from coding with just PHP. He's basically did this stunt a few years ago where he made like 12 projects in 12 months. And one of them, Nomad List, really took off. It's a directory for finding places you can like live and work around the world if you're a digital nomad. And controversially, he's also made a remote job board, which makes like over $1 million, and it's one PHP file with an SQLite database. So it's like technically not strong, but he's making loads of money. So he's doing a good job. Also, like no university education. This is how my website looks at the moment. So you can see there's people from all kinds of backgrounds, like models or working in a theater. And basically, I'm going to run through some of my other favorite stories that I've interviewed on the website. So Taylor Alexis was working as a waitress in a restaurant, and she basically just learned JavaScript through a series of really cheap Udemy courses. And she was working weekends and like evenings around like a full-time job, and she still got hired as a developer. Emma, who's from Manchester, was a beauty therapist and was doing that until COVID hit. and then decided, obviously, that she wanted a career change. So she learned JavaScript on YouTube. If anyone's wanting to learn JavaScript, there's a few people I can recommend, like Net Ninja is a popular channel. It's JavaScript tutorials delivered in a Yorkshire accent, which I think there should be more of. And Emma got into coding bootcamp, and then she got hired as a dev as well. And for some reason, the next slide isn't working. Oh, it's gone right to the end. Didn't want that. And yeah, there's also been some stories of people working in really much poorer developing countries. And a lot of geo-arbitrage is usually associated with rich people in the West kind of hiring people in poorer countries and taking advantage of that. But this guy actually flipped it around. So Mariano's from Argentina. He was learning to code, but couldn't go to university because he was so poor his family couldn't afford the bus fare to the nearest town for university. So he basically just learned mobile development online, and now he's a mobile lead for PayPal in the US. So he's earning a San Francisco salary whilst living in a really remote town in Argentina, and his salary increased 84 times compared to what it was before. So it's nice to see someone playing the geo arbitrage game from the other side. Sorry, 1 second. Oh yeah. So yeah, apart from interviewing people, I've also got a job board on my website. So basically, we all know there's a shortage of people in tech, but unfortunately, a lot of people aren't taking advantage of self-taught developers. And if you think about it, it's a really good way to get kind of scrappy people that are really determined and really focused on building a career into a job. And one of the readers of my website, Bea, was looking at my job board, and she changed career from sociology, and she managed to get hired with a dev agency, Fueled, in London. And yeah, that was pretty cool to see someone from my website get hired and get their first job in tech. So that was nice. So yeah, to wrap up, a few reasons why, if you're hiring, you should think about a developer that doesn't have a CS degree. It's a massive boost to diversity. I think we all know that most CS programs are dominated by men, basically. There's very few women. And having bootcamps is an improvement, but also having people that are self-taught. There's really no barrier to entry with self-teaching. Anyone can learn through very cheap, affordable resources, through YouTube, etc. So if you're able to hire self-taught people, you can get a lot more women, a lot more people from ethnic minorities into your company. It's also just a fairer system, I think. I don't think it's a great system at the moment where we're kind of saying to people, if you didn't like coding when you're 18, you can't get a job in our company. It's not very effective. It's also just shrinking massively the talent pool of people that you can target. And it's also just a lot better for the economy. If we get more people learning to code, more people into jobs as developers, then they will go off and make their own companies, which will create more jobs for more developers. So yeah, just to wrap up, everyone should learn to code if they want to. Tell your friends that they don't need a CS degree. And yeah, please mentor people. Please tell people that you can get into coding career if you're self-taught or if you've gone to a boot camp. And I'm also looking for people to do more mentoring, paid mentoring on no CS degree. So if anyone's interested, come up and talk to me later on about that. And I think that's everything. Cool.
Before you go, does anybody have any questions for Pete about what he does, or no CS degree? Rory.
Just curious about boot camps and the opinions that you've come across regarding boot camps that are out there. Okay, I'll start again. I'm curious about boot camps and the opinions you have come across while interviewing people or talking to people about various boot camps. Has it always been positive? Are they negative? The horror stories? What would you say?
That's an interesting question. I think there's quite a divide online because a lot of people see boot camps as like very expensive, which they often are. But in my experience, a lot of people that actually have self-taught have said afterwards, you know, to be honest, I would have just gone with a boot camp if I'd known that now. I mean, but there's a divide. I also get people that paid a lot for a boot camp in the US, especially. It's more expensive. And they were like, oh, yeah, I think it depends on the individual. But yeah, I guess they have their pros and cons. Self-teaching is obviously a lot cheaper. But with a boot camp, you have like, they usually have, if they're a good boot camp, they have links to local employers. So, which we're going to find out in a second. Someone just got hired. So they have that advantage. So I think it really depends. And some people as well, you know, for some people, they really like learning with other people. Other people are happy to just like sit with a computer and search through Stack Overflow and do that in a little bat cave or whatever. So it kind of depends what your personality is like, I think.
Anyone else?
I was just wondering if you could tell us about, you know, the story of creating your site, what inspired it, how long you've been working on it, like, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So basically, it's coming up for the 3-year anniversary. I really got inspired for it because for a couple of things. One, I was wanting to get into coding, and I just didn't really understand how I could get into it. And I don't, like, because I have like a political science degree, I don't have that background. So I was kind of like, well, am I going to have to go back to university for 4 years, which is going to cost a lot of money and a lot of time? So it's really just inspired partly for my own sake. I was kind of wanting to show people, like find out, once I started finding out that people could, you know, start websites and get into tech careers without going back for a degree, I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I want to kind of like share that information with other people. I guess as well, there's a website called indiehackers.com, which is basically tells people about how they can start a business without having venture capital funding. So it's also kind of just like a tweak on that idea where I was like, oh, okay, I can make a website like Indie Hackers, but do it for getting people into like tech careers without a CS degree, basically. Cool.
Can you plug your meetup that you're just starting?
Oh yeah, sure. Thanks, Jamie. Where would it be without you? I've started a meetup. I've done a couple of them already called Indie Edinburgh for people that are interested more in terms of like entrepreneurship and like starting a business, but like anyone's welcome in tech really. But yeah, we've had a couple of meetups. We're meeting at the Joseph Pierce pub at the top of Elm Row in Leith. And yeah, it's really just kind of like a nice opportunity to hang out with other people that are in tech in Edinburgh, talk about like, give each other help with like their businesses and stuff like that. And yeah, just a kind of casual, it's not a kind of, you know, pitching competition or you're going to get an investor check at the end of it or anything. But yeah, it's just like a nice kind of casual meetup.
And how do they find out about it?
Go on Eventbrite, and when I get around to putting it up, you'll find it.
Cool. Okay, can we give Pete another little round of applause? Thank you. Okay, 2 seconds once we get set up for the next thing. Cool, so now we are going to hear about CodeClan. So I think this kind of pairs nicely. Obviously, Pete decided he wanted to like find out more about people without CS degrees, find out more about people who have gone through boot camps, and after the mic set up.
Very professional.
If only we had proper internet connectivity, then. Sorry, cool. So Elsol is going to talk a little bit about CodeClan and maybe hopefully a little bit about your new job, which we're all very excited about.
So, my story over.
Well,
All good, I think so.
Awesome. Okay. Elsol, cheers.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll leave it as it is. It's not working the way I want it to work. Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's my first JavaScript meetup. And I'm Elisol, you can call me Eli, whatever is easier for you. And I'm gonna share my story about how did I get here. All right, oh no. Yeah. So what was I doing before becoming a junior developer? I graduated as a journalist in Venezuela, the country which I am from. And back then, I was involved in radio, television, and I had my rock band. I organized music events, and so on. I did all this also while I was teaching kids and teenagers. I taught English as a foreign language for almost 7 years. But because of many external factors that I actually couldn't control, in 2015, I moved to the UK. And I had to start from scratch. I had to educate myself again to actually prove that I was capable of doing something more. I focused on human resources and recruitment until I noticed I was not being happy. It was not just because it was just not exciting for me anymore, you know? Every day doing the same thing all over again, repeatedly. And my brain just started to ask me for exercise and for just some real juice, and juicy challenge, actually. It was not until lockdown when I made my first commit on GitHub, and I will not lie to you, I loved it. I really loved it. And I guess I could say that my coding experience started with She Codes. It's a bootcamp, it's an online bootcamp for women. And I completed 4 different courses with She Codes, and all, of course, focused in front-end development. And I was really enjoying it. Although I will admit, understanding JavaScript was hard. It was really hard. I cried a lot. David can tell you that. So my journey with CodeClan. Yes, these are my guys. Yes, look at it. Bootcamp. It's very intense. It's fast-paced. It sometimes makes you feel you make the wrong decision, but actually it's not. If anyone here is actually thinking about going for it, just go for it. It's worth it. It's really worth it. But that feeling of being like, oh no, this is not for me, that all goes away. It goes away when the code does not break and the tests all pass. That is when I felt like Superwoman. I was unstoppable. And that is when that feeling like, oh, I want to make my new career better every day. And this experience has been fantastic. It has been amazing. But the best part of it was my cohort, these little guys that you can see here. Yeah, they made it work. My cohort, the best people I could ever had as classmates. And we started as strangers. And now we are a really big group of friends who talk every single day. CodeClan is exciting, it's challenging, and 100% worth it. I honestly do not have a disadvantage for this experience anyway. Sophie, Annika, do you have one? I don't think so. It's great. Bootcamps are great. Oh, the bank account. Oh, yeah. All my money. Poof. Yes. So, yeah. Wow, look at us. This was 6 days ago. We graduated 6 days ago, man. Yeah, that's Sophie. She's right there. This is Annika. She's right there. John, you're right here. So my next move, I had a whole section prepared for this. My next move would be to continue improving myself, YouTube, LinkedIn, networking. I'm gonna code with a video guys game. Yeah, you. I'm gonna code with you, yeah? I wanna make a video game. Yes, for sure. What's next? So I'm gonna tell you a funny story. Yesterday I had my first technical interview with FanDuel. It was good, it could have been better, but it was good. Like live coding, talking, thinking about the code, and not to break it, of course. And being yourself is hard. Plus, your hands were shaking. My hands, woof. It was hard. I was, this goes about crying, but it's okay. I didn't cry. Managed. And like 5 hours ago, I'm gonna share it. Like I'm gonna say it. I got a job offer, so I got my first job with FanDuel. Yes, yeah, I got my first. I'm gonna be a software developer. Dad, I'm gonna be an engineer. Yeah. So my advice for those who are just thinking it or still thinking about it, or for my colleagues and friends, just keep going. Be yourself. You're applying to a job. Picture yourself in the office, even though you're not there. Just picture yourself there. You own the job. Own your interview. Be yourself. Not too much, probably, but just be yourself and just expose yourself. Get out to the comfort zone. You can do it. You're going to be able. That job is yours, and that job is yours, and that job will be yours as well. So just to wrap up, I want to thank you all for coming, and I would like to take this opportunity to also thank Esteban. I know you can see me. I know you're there. Who's not here? Yeah, you'll probably see this later. And Jamie, thanks to you as well. You have been such a welcoming pal. Thank you very much. I want to thank you for sharing this space, and I would love to be part of the community from now on. I'm here 100% with you. I can help you with whatever you need. I also want to thank Sofia. I want to thank Annika for coming. I want to thank my instructor, John Zarecki, for coming. And I want to thank you, David, for being part of this whole process. Yeah, so thank you guys, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellie. That was really great. I think just like it's great to have you here and to hear a little bit about your journey.
Thank
and I
you.
think like this is, like the JavaScript community doesn't belong to anyone here. It is all of ours. So really pleased to have you here.
You made it happen, babe.
Well, but actually, I suppose it's Alan forcing me to host things. I've bought beer and pizza. Cool. Does anybody have any questions, really, about Code Clan or boot camps? Or what are your expectations for the job? Is my question to you. Like, so what kind of, I mean, you're obviously quite confident. You've got through the interview. Like, I guess, like, do you feel prepared, like, for that job? I mean, what do you know that you don't know? Do you know that you don't know?
Yes,
Yeah.
I don't know
So-
TypeScript. So
Okay.
I managed to do the technical interview in another language, and I was like, you know what? I don't know anything about TypeScript. I'm going to do it in JavaScript.
Yeah.
So take it or leave it.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, it's okay. You can just continue. Okay, I'm going to start building a new component, blah, search bar, .js. I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to do it on TSX because I don't know anything. So yeah, I can be savage like that. I hate that. But it's okay. I got the job. So I feel like I still don't know so many things.
Yeah.
But I know that I still have the resources. And I still have the capacity to learn new things. Because that's me. I'm here to break the system.
I think that's really good advice, actually. I think, like, you sometimes meet people who are like, oh, well, I learned how to code this, so I don't know how to code that. But actually, a lot of coding is it's shared knowledge. It's knowledge you can build
The
in
more you know,
things.
the more you want to actually know. Like, the more you want to do, the more you want to build.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Anyway, congratulations.
Thank you.
In fact, Pete, diving in with the question.
Don't worry, it's not a tough question. What was the favorite thing? You said you made like 3 web apps. What was the favorite thing that you made at CodeClan?
I would say it was, this is difficult because the second one and the third one. The second one was, it was called Triolingo. It was an application actually for kids to learn Spanish. It was so cool. I'll show you later. And the second one, I built it with Annika. It's a disability app for people with disabilities to find the right hotels that are accommodated to their needs. So I would go with those 2. The first one, I could improve it. It was an inventory app for a hotel shop, blah. But it was full stack. I really learned a lot. We had COVID. we got COVID, and it was during second and third week of Coachland, something like that, first month. So I missed classes for like 2 weeks. It was very, very, very challenging. The anxiety levels were woofed. But I managed, I don't know how, but I did. But a favorite one, they're tied. I wouldn't say, yeah.
Cool.
I guess you already gave away the answer to my question. Yeah, how much of your old self you're gonna bring to the new, like you have quite mixed profile now. You did, as you said, journalism, you had your rock band. You said that you made up for Spanish, so it's still a lot of yourself now with this new coding experience. How much of your old past, yourself, you're gonna bring this on to this new venture?
For whatever I do, I give 120% of myself. It doesn't matter if I feel uncomfortable, I will reach the goal. Doesn't matter. Put me into Word, we'll win it. So whatever is on my side always wins. So I will always give 130% of myself. So you either take me or leave me.
Cool. Well, another round of applause. Thank you very much. Cool. So we are just going to take a short break for picking up a little bit more pizza if there's any left. I think there's a couple of slices. There's some more soft drinks and beer, and just a 5-minute break, and then I will be doing a talk about a book that I read last week, which I thought I might want to share with everybody. So just 5 minutes, and we'll be back here. Cheers. Like, interested in what you've got to say. We will be hearing from you at some point in the next few months.
I'm not to deploy.
Yeah. Cool. Are we all good, Alan?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So hey, everybody. I have now met you all. I'm Jamie. I co-host EdinburghJS, and I am a freelance software developer, and I've been doing that probably like professionally for probably about 10 years, but coded my first website with HTML 3.2 in like the mid-90s. So kind of experience going back through various languages and working in various different organizations. So I tend to work for startups, small organizations, maybe people who are making a new product from scratch, or maybe people who have a product but need something done to it or need some kind of emergency help to tide them over for a particular deadline. So I thought I'd do a little talk on a book that I read last week, which I thought was quite interesting, and I thought it might be good to help prompt a little bit of discussion amongst people after the talk, because I'm interested in hearing from it. So that book was a book called Work Clean by a guy called Dan Charnas, and it relates the idea of mise en place for software developers. So mise en place is a term from cooking. So like professional chefs, they have this thing called mise, which is their preparation for performing their work. So the book Work Clean talks about mise en place and then relates it to knowledge work. So I've taken like some of the headings and like chapters from that and tried to relate it into software development and put a couple of thoughts down that I've had like from my experience of like kind of working in software. So I think it's quite good to kind of think through how other people work in different industries to get an idea or maybe a different perspective for how we might work. So the idea of mise en place is that kitchen is obviously quite a hectic environment. It's both controlled, but also quite chaotic. I don't know about you, but I mean, I occasionally watch the little kitchen nightmares or whatever, and it's all going on. And there are a few things that sort of come out about the way that the line should operate, the way that control is like there's no one in charge, or like orders are coming and going, and people are working on different things, and it's not necessarily in order. But a well-run kitchen has to be efficient. As a business, it has to take tickets in, it has to produce these things, and it has to produce them with these time constraints. So I think it's quite interesting to apply the ideas from cooking to software development, just to kind of get a perspective. It's not like a right answer, but it's an interesting way of looking at things so that we can examine kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis. So mise en place is almost like a philosophy. It means literally getting things in the right place. But it's kind of a philosophy of movement. It's concerned with putting those things in the right place and working out what the right place for those things are. So it's economy of movement in a kitchen. It's kind of almost like a ballet of I need my right hand to be here and I will sprinkle these things, then I will chop and I will turn around and I've got my eye on this and I've got my eye on that and I'm listening for the next things coming in, and I am handing stuff over to someone else, or coordinating with someone else to try and produce these dishes. So I think it's kind of difficult to think, well, how does that apply to the digital world, which doesn't have that same sense of movement? But I think the closer you examine it, the more I think you can kind of find that movement in software and in the tools that we use. So let's see what we can learn from chefs. So the first thing that the book talks about is planning. And planning, if you're running a kitchen, it's not like you come in at the start of service and you're like, an order comes and you're like, right, what have we got going on for the day? There needs to be a plan. Chefs are turning up early, they're doing their preparation. They are chopping things in advance, they are preparing things in advance, they are making dishes earlier that day for the service that they expect that evening. So they can get things in place ready so that when the orders come in, they can grab a bit of this, they can grab a bit of that, the sauce is maybe bubbling away, there's, the meat has been cut and prepared into the form that it will then be worked on. So I guess for software, it's like, how do you go about planning? And that isn't necessarily planning at the project level, but planning your day out. So you turn up for work, you sit down at your computer, and I know that I'm as guilty as anyone else of going, oh, right, okay, look at the ticket I was working on tomorrow, and just start. And quite often, you kind of get through the day and you're like, oh, well, I started and I just carried on. And the kind of meta-level project stuff maybe falls by the wayside. Like, how many people was, oh, yeah, I was going to help you with that thing, but actually I got stuck doing this thing. So perhaps some planning is required for us to kind of get more of a handle on what we're doing, like our practice. So not the general software level, but what we do. And I think for that, we're quite guilty of mistaking things for planning. So you're there, you've got your issue system, whether it's GitHub issues or any other software that has tickets coming in. But a ticket isn't actually a plan of how you are going to do the work. Much like a menu item in a restaurant isn't a recipe for producing the dish. So tickets are usually written by someone else, or someone else saying, can you make a ticket for that because I'm telling you about it right now and you're typing it in for me. So those things get dictated down. They are maybe an idea, a bug report, a product spec, something that needs adjusted, some sort of research that needs to be done. But that isn't actually what you are going to do the work. And if you're trying to improve as a software developer, I think it pays to sometimes take a step back and say, okay, well, I've been asked to implement this feature or refactor this bit of code. What process and what steps am I going to go through to do that? An important question from the back of that is, what is it that I'm trying to do? What does done look like? Is it a component that I'm creating? Is it a bit of research? Is it whatever it is? But to do that, you need to start with figuring out what done looks like, and that isn't necessarily on the ticket. I think anyone who's done client work knows you get vague demands. You get a kind of please implement something that does this functionality. But your version of done, there's multiple ways of doing that. So it's you need to have an idea in your head. I'm going to do these steps to get to this thing in which those requirements are fulfilled. So you've got your idea of done that's maybe different from what maybe a project manager looks like. That might include testing or whatever. So the next question that you need to ask is, to get to this idea of done for you, you need to ask, what are the dependencies? Who is asking me for this? What is it that they're asking me to do? Where is it in the code that they're asking me to alter it? Is it, you might be working in a project that's across multiple code bases, there's coordination, it needs to be done for these people to do these things. Maybe it's a bit of research, like, hey, we're thinking about using this library or using this tool, can you do research? Who needs that, what, where, and when? And knowing that will allow you to prioritize your time and make sure you're kind of touching all the different things that are required to get to that done place. So in order to do that, once you know who is depending on you and when they're depending on you to do things, you've got the idea of done. Do you understand the process and tools that you're using to get there? An example of this is, I was recently working on a project coming in, and they were like, oh, we need to improve our testing. But the testing framework was, installed, someone had Yarn installed it, a year or two ago, but the tests, there was like 2 tests for some random 2 components that I presume were done first, and then not really much else. And I kind of wonder, is it that there wasn't a process? So when they were completing code, they just weren't checking it. We're not bothered about figuring out if we're doing tests or not. Maybe it's that they didn't actually understand the tool. So yeah, testing's all right in principle, but actually what library are you using? Do you know how to write the tests for the tools you're working with? So you might know about testing simple JavaScript, but do you know about testing React components? Do you know, do you understand what feedback the tool might give you, or is it getting in your way? So asking this in the morning, you might identify, actually, I don't really know about that, so I'm going to read for a little bit about this and allocate some time to do some research. So rather than just diving straight in and be like, oh, it isn't working, I'll tweak this, I'll tweak that. Actually reading the docs sometimes, to get back to the basics of what is the tool and what am I trying to do with it. Helps you understand the tool, helps you understand the process, and helps you understand if there's an alignment between what you're trying to achieve, the thing that you need to get done, and the tools and processes that you've got in place. And that's, I guess, a question about your skills, but also a question about the system that you're working in. So to relate that back to the kitchen, if you're trying to make a dish and you don't know how to boil that egg, you're going to have problems. But also, if the head chef hasn't ordered in eggs or hasn't got them in the fridge, you're also going to have problems. So planning will help you understand where the process might fall down a bit.
And you still swear both ways.
Yeah.
As a chef or a coder, you still swear.
Sometimes at computers, and computers are easier to swear at than other people, but maybe that's why I'm not a chef. So, the next step is to arrange your space. And I think this came through in the book, that there's this kind of philosophy of kind of physical work and having things in their right place. That when you're doing things in a kitchen, it came through, that you're trying to eliminate resistance to doing tasks. And I think that's fundamental for kind of upping the level of professionalism that a software developer can bring to work. That it's identifying, hey, I can save some time by writing myself a script that does these things. I can save some time because I'm getting these questions back all the time, or these people that I'm working with, they're asking me the same things, or they're finding bugs of a similar nature, and by the time I hear about it, I'm already doing the next thing. So how is it that I arrange my digital workspace to get that feedback, get the head chef shouting, this is crap, you don't know how to cook, throwing it back at me. How is it that you do that in a digital way to get that feedback and get to eliminate that resistance? And as I was saying with the test, it's the same kind of thing. If you don't have templates set up for tests, why not make a template in your code editor, put in a keyboard shortcut, bam, you've got a test scaffold, there, and it works, and it's now appearing. You're running a process. Maybe you've got a script to do that, or whatever. But it's figuring out for the project that you're on what that resistance is. So when you start your day, you're into your space. What is it that you do to arrange that? Now, I log on to GitHub. I look at the tickets that I've got. But I don't actually mark the tickets that I'm working on that day. I'm like, oh, I'll do that, and then that one's for me as well. Maybe I filter by assigns to me, but in smaller teams, you can kind of scroll down the list and see that. But sometimes that's actually a little bit of resistance. I've had people say, okay, I work with some clients, who just put tickets there for me. And oh, that's that ticket. I can't exactly remember what it's called, but you said you'd work on it. Why don't we have a filter or view that at the start of the day, you tag the things you're working on that day, and there they are in a nice list that you can go back to. You can group related things. You can use temporary mechanisms that are for that day and that day only in order to kind of organize your space and work and eliminate that resistance. Other questions that you might want to ask are, do you have scripts to boot up the work? I log on to some projects, I'm like, oh, right, start my database service, then I need to start the API server, then I'll start my storybook, and then I'll start the web, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I forgot to do the database, but it takes a while, it takes a minute to figure out which service isn't running.
Do you not have something like the Trello board that you can use for the GitHub tickets and labels?
Yeah, absolutely. This is exactly what you should be doing at the start of the day. So kind of figuring out, if you've got this Trello board that lots of people are using, you might have your tickets, but do you have your tickets that you're working on today? They're not just lost in the list somewhere and you're going back and searching for them. It might be as simple as saying, I'm going to open my 4 tabs today, and here they are, and I'm going to pin them. I'm going to have them in a browser window, and I'll have that browser window on like my side display or something. So I can always just see these are the things that I'm working on, and if I'm context switching between things, I can, there's this workspace that I'm working on for this other person, and maybe that's been put on hold. So it's that kind of almost physical arrangement, but like for the here and now, rather than kind of a process, tickets go in the backlog and you just look at your tickets. Part of that is, if you're scripting things, can you write scripts to help you do and maintain that? So you're booting everything up. Do you have where you left off noted down somewhere? Where is that noted down? How do you coordinate with others in the team? Now, in a kitchen, like, you obviously need to work with other folks. Like, you have to have ingredients. One person is usually responsible for buying the ingredients and bringing those in. They need to know what's on the menu. What is it likely to be? Is this a midweek or is it a Saturday night? Are there differences between those things? So it's, what is it that we're doing in our projects that is like that? How are you communicating proactively? Hey, I need that, bit of meat from the grill now because I've prepped the, bed of salad that is going on. How have you, who has notified you that you're to coordinate work? If there's a UI designer doing one thing and you're doing another thing, it might be good to work on the same thing at the same time and coordinate. So often, one practice that I've definitely got into is notifying folks what I'm working on. So not even like stand-up wise. For some organizations, stand-ups are a bit overkill. There's nothing wrong with, hey, this is what I'm doing this morning, this is what I'll be doing this afternoon, and at so-and-so I'll look at your PR probably about mid-morning, whatever. So that helps you kind of coordinate with people. And I think this is potentially some of the difficulty that we get into as software developers with asynchronous work. So, asynchronous work is, kind of this, the big thing that people are talking about. But sometimes people mistake async work. They do it in a way that then becomes uncoordinated work. And async work requires perhaps even more coordination to do things. You can't just go, well, I've pushed that up, and if they log on to GitHub, they'll see that the branch has been updated. You have got to coordinate that. So even if it's in an async manner and you don't expect an immediate response, making sure at the start of the day you're communicating about what it is that you're working on, what it is you're doing, I think can help. The next question, how often do you actually customize your tools for the project at hand? So I guess it's very easy to be one of those people that is constantly tweaking their dev setup. But do you have the right things for the project that you're working on? So it isn't generally, I like to configure my editors and my workspace in this way, but for this tool, what do I need to get right? What plugins do I need? If I'm working with a lot of text, often I enable a bunch of plugins to do with text editing and line sorting or list sorting for certain types of work that I'm doing on. Whereas other things, I get a whole bunch of React plugins that can help detect issues, or ESLint plugins. So it's, rather than having your favorite setup, how have you customized your tools to the project at hand? In the same way that a chef, they might have their favorite knife, but they've also got a fish knife or a cheese knife, and those do specific jobs. An example of this that I've done recently is where I was working across multiple repositories, tabbing between my VS Code windows. I was like, I actually am spending ages because I tabbed to the wrong thing, and then you tab back, but accidentally you've tabbed through some. So you're like, oh, you can't get back, and you sort of get in this kind of loop of not quite getting to the window you want. There's extensions that you can color code the project, so that the whole window changes color, and I think it's Peacock or something like that. You set a project color, so you can be like, oh, it's red that I'm going to, because red's the API, yellow's the front end or whatever. So having a think at the start of the day about have I customized my setup for the work that I'm going to do? So the next step, or the next chapter that I looked at was clean as you go. Now, this is probably one of the things that after a while in a project becomes something that you have maybe a bit of guilt about. Cleaning as you go for software is about refactoring, revisiting, and making sure you're keeping things tidy. So, I find this quote by Jeff Atwood, talking about refactoring. So it is the idea that you need to be constantly looking at your code and saying, is this right? Am I cleaning it up? Am I taking care of the variable names? Has there been a drift since I last worked on this in terms of concept or scope? And quite often what you start with, maybe a few months, maybe it's gone back to the product people and they come back with something and it doesn't quite do the same thing, but you've kept all your variable names the same. It takes 2 seconds. Rename that variable and it will just do it through the file. It's that kind of process that then helps you get your head back into it, eliminates resistance for when you're next looking at it. So it isn't necessarily about the kind of like minimalism. It isn't like, I'm deleting things and aligning things. You can have like linters to take care of your actual code style to make it clean. But it's kind of about the values that you bring of, I'll spend an extra few minutes like polishing that up because, I'm a professional. Yes, that test, I've thought of another case, so I'm going to add that other case to the test. I have, extracted that function and named it something new and appropriate because I've added a bit to it or whatever. I'm not just doing my inline documents, but I'm going back to the main docs just to check if someone's written a note there about what it is that I'm working on. So I think looking at, chefs, there's obviously like a professionalism there that I think in software development, it's good to get into the habit of doing that. Because if you don't do that, and if you don't develop that discipline, you're going to find yourself running up against barriers to advancing in your career, because you will then create the mess and you won't know how to produce that kind of quality code early on in the process. And the better you do that, the longer your code will be functional, the more appropriate it will be for the problem that is you're working on, and that then ultimately delivers value to your end users. The next interesting idea in the book was about making moves to unlock cascades. Now this is a thing that requires kind of 2 different definitions of time. So there's kind of immersive time where you are doing a thing. And then there's process time where the thing is doing. You've set it to go. So that's the difference between you sitting chopping and you putting something in the oven. Something goes in the oven and you don't need to think about it for an hour. Whereas chopping, you're doing immediately. So when you are thinking about what it is that you're doing, you should be asking, am I unlocking someone else to do something? Or am I running a process that will then be done by the time I finish this other thing? There's a good book by Cal Newport. He's got a series of books on working practices. Now, this isn't the be-all and end-all, but he talks about deep work and immersive time. But it's quite clear that he also thinks that we should, we shouldn't undervalue process work. You can get a lot of leverage. So I think in terms of software development, we might think about that in terms of, if I get this PR shifted and review it, that enables someone else to do some work, and then they can come back to me later today. So maybe it's important to do that work first. Maybe the UI people want to review what we're doing. So in terms of the data loading versus the UI, I'll do the UI first, I'll put up a prototype, they can do a first pass review whilst I'm doing the data stuff, and then once I've done that, they will have had time to come back. And that goes to the morning coordination. Hey, I'll be done with the component UI by mid-morning. Can you get back to me about that? Because I'll be spending an hour doing the API, but then it'd be nice to coordinate and tweak on a call. So it's that kind of coordination that is required. So thinking in terms of your work, like what is it you can leverage to kind of take advantage of that process time, and what do you need to kick off early so that you're not like, you end up with PRs that are like, cool, I'll get to that this afternoon, tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, I'll get to that this afternoon. And you get these sort of zombie things that then almost get abandoned. Next chapter was on a concept, inspect and correct. So this is the idea of making sure that we've got mentors and feedback. So what is it that you're doing to develop your practice during the day? In a kitchen, there's a hierarchy. You will get shouted at if you don't do things right. People expect a certain standard. What is it that you're getting? Maybe not the shouting, but that kind of quick feedback, and making sure that you are inspecting the work you do and going back to it. Now, one thing I was thinking is that how often do you go back to work that you've done, and what's the gap between it? So if I'm doing work, typically it will come back in some form, maybe a day or two later, when whoever it is that's signing off comes back and says, yes, but can we also get it to do this or do that or whatever. So you might see something a couple of days later, maybe a week later. But once you're kind of done with it, do you ever go back and review it a month later? Do you say, oh, I haven't touched that part of the system in a month. I'm just going to go in and check that I remember how that works. A year later, I'm working on a project that I worked on 3 years ago, the last time I touched the code, and it feels like someone else wrote it. And I'm like, oh, this is definitely me. It says, I've got Git blame up, and I'm like, this is all me, but it's making sure that you are refamiliarizing yourself with the code so you can work on it if you want, but also assessing, back then I didn't know how to, or back then I hadn't discovered this pattern or way of doing things, or maybe I hadn't discovered this library. And maybe there's some quick tweaks that you can do to upgrade something, or maybe it's identifying the progress that you've made so that you can appreciate it and invest more in making progress, or just give yourself a pat on the back, which is useful sometimes. At this meetup, I think it's good if we chat about technical stuff, and obviously we should have some more technical talks at some point, but sharing that information with people and getting that kind of inspection of work. I appreciate it when I can send people things, hey, can you just take a quick look at this? Just spend a couple of minutes. What do you think about that? What's your gut feel? Can you look at this code? Am I mad for thinking that ... So once you're doing your work, you've identified what done looks like. Do you know how to finish? So finishing at the end of the day isn't necessarily completing the work, but it is the idea of, if it's a multi-day thing, it's ensuring that you can resume it easily. So it's maybe leaving yourself some notes, thinking, oh, I've only got an hour left in my day. I'm actually going to do the documentation for what I've done so that tomorrow morning I can pick up and resume and I'm back in the zone. I know what the problem is. Maybe I've documented that either on the ticket or in the code itself. So it's like, how and when will I finish? And how is it that if I need to finish without actually finishing the full task, that I can kind of wrap it up? This is kind of related to the idea that David Allen talks about in the book Getting Things Done, where your mind is like an idea generator, but you're kind of crap at remembering things. And I think the more important it is to organize, if you've got a lot on and you're doing a lot of different things, that's the worst time to be like, yeah, cool, I'll remember that, because things are going to fall apart. So it might be stuff like having PR checklists. They can be a bit, annoying sometimes, this doesn't require that, but I'm going to leave it off. But checklists can be quite good for that sort of thing. Testing and stories, having that kind of inline documentation co-located with the code, somewhere where you can get to it and it's part of the workspace. Telling people that you're done, like quite often, like I do think, I've been in projects where you're like, I've done that work, it's on staging, and like the project manager will be like, a week later, hey, is that thing in staging? And you're like, yeah, did you not see it? Well, you didn't tell me, And like telling other people that you're done with that enables them to either give you more work or for them to give you feedback. So it's that kind of proactivity, like any stakeholders that were related to that kind of who, what, where, and when at the start. Have you actually told them that you're done, or you're finished, or have you told them where you've got to so that they can plan their work appropriately? So yeah, that was the book I read, Work Clean by Dan Charnas, and that is the end of my talk. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Okay, cool.
So, it feels like the beginning of the talk talks more about process, and I was thinking Kanban, stuff like that, as in how do you map your process, where you are, how you want to, you said, put things next to the next thing and try to look for constraints and the things to improve. But then it looks more like it's then dev process focus, more like CI. So what are you thinking there exactly? Is it more like team level or more like the automated process level?
I would say it's more at the kind of individual level of what you're doing as part of that system. So there's a way that the system will function, you know, like either like code comes in, you know, you get the tickets, you work on them, and there's planning that happens at maybe the system level, like for either technical requirements or for project requirements. But on a day-to-day basis, how much do you plan the almost physical activity that you're going to do? So to give you an example from something that I was working on, there was a bit of code, like some parts of a web app, an API, that were really janky. And we knew we needed to refactor them. So we have a plan to refactor them. And the project manager was like, can we do that in the next 3 weeks? Sure. OK, so you know, now I know that I'm working on it. And we've got these 20 files to work on. So then we're like, well, what are we doing to these files? I know I'm going to refactor them to do, you know, A, B, and C, but like, which part of the files am I working on? Like, so for my working day, I was like, well, the first thing I'll do is I'm going to take all the styles because the styles are all jumbled up throughout everything and we haven't got a list of them. So rather than do all the work, my plan is to go through wherever there's a style, extract it. That is my plan for what I'm physically going to be doing. And that's not really something you can capture at a project level. That's understanding like the kind of the steps to achieve that kind of done thing. You know, so it's like do this, then do that, then do that. And I knew essentially I could break it down to like the first part of my day I'm going to be copying and pasting. The second part of my day I'm going to be working with data loading. The third part, you know, to break it down to that level. So maybe that's the difference between the kind of planning and system functioning at a general level and the kind of more individual, what am I doing for work and have I really understood what I'm going to do rather than just diving straight in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Cool. Sorry, I thought you wanted.
Thanks. First of all, thank you so much for sharing all this experience and thoughts. Really appreciate it. I just want to know, being a freelancer, and what would be your best advice for junior coders such as ourselves?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess like it depends on whether or not you're being a freelancer or...
Let's say that we're not going to be a freelancer.
Yeah, like because there's different priorities. I think some of the best things that I learned was from sitting next to people who are better than me. I managed to get a good friend of mine involved in a side project that I wanted to do, and he said, "Well, I'm coding in Ruby on Rails at the moment," and I said, "Oh, I don't."
That was like 20 years ago. Or
Well,
something
just
like that.
back in, like, no, not that long, probably about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that, or whenever. He was like, okay, you know, we're using Ruby on Rails, and he was like, oh, I don't know that. But for the first, like, part of the project, I just sat next to him and, you know, added pizza, and he did the coding. But I was looking at his screen, so it wasn't even, like, co-coding, like, or, like, pair programming, because I really wasn't doing anything. I was just looking and learning. And from that, it isn't just about this is how the code works. Like, yes, you should find out how the code works and like technically what things do, but how he was thinking about it. Oh, I'll need to do this. Down the line, we're going to do this, which is why I'm doing this little bit of prep work now. This is how this type of function works. This is how these sort of databases perform. So it was all those things that were part of his like kind of working process that I found were super helpful for me to get up and running quickly in that. And I think one of the real downsides, amongst many, of the COVID pandemic has been when you're sitting at home working, remote working, you are not able to just go, hey, what is this? And I think people sit there for far too long struggling with something and not asking someone who's maybe either worked in it or worked with the thing before or has got more experience. And I think if you're going into a job, establishing who you can turn to, like, hey, got a minute? Can I just share my screen and like go through what I'm thinking? That, I think, is probably the most important things, more than any other language you can learn, is getting into that discipline, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So you were actually
Yeah, I was just wondering on the refactoring point, do you have any opinions yourself on, when, I mean, you could obviously keep refactoring and
Yeah.
keep refactoring, when do you stop?
Yeah, it's a conversation like that you can have, and I think I'm always very conscious that, you come in and you're like, oh, what is this? This is not written, like in my favorite way, or whatever. So I think there are certain things which I don't think are acceptable. So if bits of code are technically incorrect, even if they're working, those are things that you need to fix. So I've been working in projects where the devs are like, it works. I'm like, but you have used the framework in a way that it is not designed or supported to be works. And it's the equivalent of, like, I sort of liken it to, like, is that car moving because it's rolling down the hill, or is it moving because the engine's on and it's actually operating? So I think refactoring for me, like, certainly if there's anything that's technically incorrect, because that will just cause you nightmares when you try to find bugs or, things like that, then the rest of it really does depend on kind of the business requirements and what you're trying to do. It's that kind of premature optimization thing. You can take on a bit of technical debt and leverage that to get you to a place, but I think if you've got a kind of professional discipline and you've got a process, it should be something that you know and decide on, rather than it just being like, oh, we should refactor that. You have no idea how long it might take. You're not really too sure what it is you want to do. You just want to rewrite it. So it should be more of maybe a conscious choice and a trade-off with all the other factors than just not liking the code, except I think in the case for technical problems.
Sorry, just one follow-up was that, how many of your clients or people that you've worked with do that? Like consistently go back and refactor things versus like my company doesn't do that.
For you.
I would say, so the nature of the projects that I work on tend to be smaller. So there usually isn't as much technical debt, and quite often I wrote the thing in the first place, So I've got clients that I've been with for multiple years, and different people come in and work on different things. But I would say that can be neglected too often, and it can get people into a bit of a bind where if they need something urgently, and even if the thing is working and technically ticking away, but then you want to redeploy it, or there's like an end of life for the version of Node or you're working on, or like, I've had notifications all this week, like your Heroku plan, and I was like, that was from the thing 15 years ago. Like, none of that is relevant anymore, So it's the kind of things where you might want to upgrade things, and then you get into sort of dependency issues and versioning issues. So usually if I'm revisiting a project, sometimes as an experiment, I'm just going to bump every package to the latest version and just see what happens, so that I know whether or not this is going to break entirely, or there's going to be some little issues with this thing. But it's kind of at least making sure that you've got the knowledge, even if you don't necessarily action it. Because I think as a professional, you should always try and be aware so you can make that choice rather than having a particular course of action forced upon you, if that makes sense. And I think if an organization isn't at least going back and saying, this is why we're not refactoring, I think that's a problem. It should be something that people decide on and review, depending on the size of an organization, or depending on the size of their organization, reasonably regularly.
I was wondering if all these sort of process tips and or best culinary practices have become a bit more obvious since you become a freelancer and had more exposure to different organizations. Or is it something that you've gradually picked up on over your career?
Yeah, I think one of the things is working for people, like I occasionally go into organizations with established practices or established bad practices. And, you know, I go into organizations with very good practices as well. And it's always interesting to figure out, like, you know, there's a kind of superficial thing. You might go in and be like, oh, we need to have better PR reviews, but actually, like, the culture isn't there to support them. Or maybe you say, oh, we need a better let's track the number of story points that we're using. That's easy. Whereas actually the more fundamentals aren't there across the team of why. And I think some of that touched on, it isn't just about minimalism or cleanliness. It's about what you value and a kind of professional attitude towards that kind of finishing and that quality control and that learning and that receiving feedback. I think as a freelancer, yeah, obviously seeing, you know, I work for 3 or 4 people maybe over a year, you know, maybe a couple at any one time, and actually like going into different companies with different projects, with different values, with different priorities is useful to see kind of what works and what doesn't work. But I think what generally works is if you've got good standards and you know when you're applying them and when you're skimping on them for reasonable reasons.
Yeah. Is it a point that you pitch yourself on when you go out to look for a new employer to work for?
I am fortunate enough that my friends tend to send me work. So usually they're like, Jamie will sort it out, don't worry, you know, or something like that. Or it's something that I think, you know, some jobs people said, oh, you know, I'll be able to get up to speed and I'll be able to bring, you know, some of that process work, not in terms of like, you know, agile or stand-ups or anything, but just in terms of like looking at the code and figuring out what we need to do to get it to the place where it needs to be. So yeah, something that I tend to pitch myself on. But,
cool.
Yeah. Rory?
When can we look forward to Jamie's repo nightmares? Or, when can we look forward to Jamie's repo nightmares?
Yeah. When I storm in.
What is this shit?
Well, you never know. I did actually think that'd be quite a cool business to do, just to model yourself on that kind of thing. Who knows? Maybe one day.
Other, like, more serious question, though. Right, so like me, you're kind of working for people who have an established business. They might be a technical client. They've already got like their whole CI. They've got tests. You know, they're doing this. They've got their Kanban board. Blah 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 blah. Versus a person who's on their own. They're a solo entrepreneur getting their like MVP up off the ground, and you're going to help them. Now, the kind of amount of effort that I would put into the mise en place for supporting this person doing a new project, and it's just going to be one-on-one, versus like the amount of kind of process support that I'm going to do for a team and set up a ticketing system for a long-term project versus a short one. There's obviously just some things that you're not going to do, right?
Yeah.
For the individual person. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about the, you know, what's the cutoff point of I'm just over-optimizing here. I don't need to like set up a full-blown support system stack. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you over Kanban board it, you'll just hamstring yourself, right?
Yeah, correct. And I think part of that, you know, the other side of it is not about minimalism, is that in doing the system, if you think of it in terms of resistance to work, it's like, you know, you put too many checklists on your PR template, you're just going to ignore it because you're going to be like, oh, I don't need to do that this time. And it becomes valueless. So the mise en place, getting things in the right place involves you knowing what the right things are and they're appropriate. You know, like to put it back to the chef metaphor, what kitchen are you working in? What dish are you trying to prepare? Like, choose the appropriate tools for the project. So it isn't like a system of you should have all these things, but more a philosophy of try and minimize the movement, try and learn what things cause resistance in projects like this. because they are definitely different things between projects, which is why I think how often do you customize your plugins, your editor, your process for the particular project? It's quite an important question because it helps you think what is appropriate for what I'm trying to do. And I'm as guilty as anyone.
No, it's a good point because like you come across stuff and it's like, oh, this is a productivity set and this is what we're going to do for this project, and it's dogma, right? It's like this will work no matter what. It's like, yeah, but this is a pain in the ass, and there's like 2 of us, so
yeah,
we don't need to do half the things we're doing.
in the same way with say like testing, you don't need to cover everything. Like if you want to know, do all my API endpoints work, just have a certain test account and snapshot all your API endpoints. That's good for what you need it for a small project. You know, same with like anything else. You can put in some things in place that will help identify issues if they come up, but aren't a burden to maintain. So yeah, I think it is part of that experience and part of the professional process for kind of learning how to do things. Cool. On that note, because I'm conscious of the time, it's now 8:30. If anyone's got any more questions, be hanging around for another half an hour. Thank you very much for coming. I've really enjoyed meeting everybody tonight, and I hope you enjoyed meeting each other as well. Next month, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're not going to have any talks. The idea is we might just go and have a little social night in a pub somewhere, kind of summer social. Haven't booked anywhere yet, haven't decided what date, but it will probably be somewhere near here in about 4 weeks' time. August we'll take off because festivals, holidays, and so on, and then we'll be back in September with more talks. And thank you to the people who are in this room who have volunteered to do that. I will be in touch in the next few weeks. So cool. Thank you very much for coming, and see you soon.